All set? Okay. This is the October 18th, 2023 Finance Board meeting. Call to order at 6:05 PM. The first item on our agenda tonight is the approval of the minutes from the September 20th, 2023 meeting. I've had a chance to go through them. I had no comments. I don't know if anyone else had any comments. Or I'll make the motion to accept the minutes for the September 20th, 2023.
Yeah, quickly, under the town administrator updates, a letter from PRSD, is that a typo or is it a redistribution of capital?
I think it means regarding the
Oh, okay.
redistribution.
Got it. Second.
Oh, yes, that was for regarding, sorry. I'll go.
Your mics are off.
Turn it on. That was just for regarding, but I will fix that word.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? The next,
Alex needs to abstain from that.
oh,
Oh, that's right. I
that's
wasn't
right,
there.
you weren't there. Sorry.
No.
So 3 in favor, 1 abstention.
Ready?
The next item on the agenda is the regional agreement with the Pentucket Regional School District. At the last meeting, I had forwarded along the memorandum from the West Newbury, and prior to this meeting, I also distributed the letter from Merrimack and the comments from Selectman Castronellis that were presented to the Board of Selectmen here in Groveland. I don't know if anyone had any questions about any of the changes or comments that had been proposed. I know from my own standpoint, reading through them, I think the changes are reasonable changes. I know Merrimack was just looking for clarification on what the proposed change meant in terms of the elementary schools and eliminating or consolidating or what that would entail. And I understand Selectwoman Castronellis's questions about like being able to verify the calculations themselves as you get to that point. But I don't have any further comments on what was proposed. I don't know if anyone else has anything.
Yeah, Kathy brings up some great points in some of her questions. And Merrimack, I understand that, hate vague language. In West Newbury's, I imagine this will be struck as being redundant, but in section 12 budget, the advisory committee will meet from time to time, but on the next page it says shall convene 2 meetings during the budget year. So I mean, is that, we're gonna strike that out? And then I noticed wherever it's selectmen, they have select board. That's throughout that'll be throughout the new agreement as well. Do you know about that? Can you speak to that at all, Rebecca? Do you know?
So whether or not they can utilize the name if we're legally still declared as a Board of Selectmen, is that what you said? I'm sorry.
No. I noticed everywhere a lot of places in the document, wherever it said select men, it's been changed to select board.
Yes,
That's going to be throughout the document, wherever it,
I do know that West Newbury officially changed it to Select Board, and I know Merrimack changed it to Select Board, or went through the process of making that official change.
yeah, it just
We have
reflects
not.
the diversity of the boards nowadays. And to my first point, it still looks like it hasn't been stricken, but it seems redundant. The advisory will meet from time to time. Time to time could mean once every decade. But on the next page, it says shall convene 2 meetings during the budget process. So, I mean, that's more definitive and really strong language. So will we be striking out this very vague language and replacing it with this very specific language?
I believe that the draft added the underlined. I'd have to go back and take a look. But I do know that it was a conversation that we did have with the administration about wanting to, one, keep the monthly meetings that we're currently having with the administration, as well as myself, the town administrator in Merrimack, as well as the town manager in West Newbury, and having that be something that's solidified, that we do meet monthly, that we don't go back to the way things were in the past where we had not met on a routine basis. And then also that the communities enjoyed the fact that during the year of the override, instead of going to each individual community, which they can still do in terms of budget presentations, et cetera, it was nice to have those 2 meetings, that one in the beginning about the state of the district, and a little update, as well as once they had their final budgetary recommendations, that we met together and they presented those together. So I believe the bottom one that says that they shall convene 2 meetings during the budget process was both the initial meeting that we typically have in like the November, December timeframe, and then the budget presentation that they have in February. But I'd have to double check on the first one that you referred to with meeting from time to time. I'm not sure. I'd have to get clarification myself.
Okay. And I had one other thing, especially because we just have a brand-new $144 million middle high school. It talked, and I don't remember where it was. It talked about public hearings being held for the budget process in a location in one of the towns. Why wouldn't we have it in the auditorium at the new high school and just be, this is where it's going to be? I forget where I read that.
It's number 2 under that same section. Public hearing shall be held in any district school building.
Oh, yeah. In any district school building. Well, we've got a brand-new high school with a brand-new auditorium, a beautiful facility to hold these public hearings. Why do we have to be so vague and not be very specific at this point and say, it's going to be in the auditorium at the middle high school?
Well, the last ones were. I think maybe in case there's a conflict, what if there's a school play, a band concert, some other sort of conflict? It's nice to have the flexibility for a backup if we need to. But I would think that the school, since last year that's where they were, and we know that that's the central location, I think that's ideal. I think that's what would be the expectation.
I would hope.
Yeah, and it has been in practice, but I think having an alternative is a good thing.
Flexibility is always good. Planning is always better.
It is.
Those are my only 2 things that I saw, other than Kathy's great points, which should be explored in greater detail. I wish she was here so I could help her with this spreadsheet, too.
So Rebecca, the next step on this, like, it's been before the Board of Selectmen, and are they going to respond back to West Newbury? Are they, I don't know what the process is at this point.
So the Board of Selectmen met on the matter, and Kathy, Selectman Cashinellis presented the memo that you've been provided, and I was going to go through and refine that to make sure that all of that was something that we could include as part of the agreement, or was necessary. Some of them were statements that there was errors and things of that nature, so it wasn't necessarily pertinent to changing the agreement. But definitely, I plan to get this back before the Board of Selectmen. Their next meeting is October 23rd. Actually, they do meet prior to the school has invited the town and the Board of Selectmen to the State of the District and Regional Agreement meeting on November 7th at the Pawtucket Regional Middle High School. And at that meeting, they're hoping that we can vote, as was done in 2016, to accept the agreement as drafted and amended. I was hoping to get this back before the Board of Selectmen to make a vote prior to that meeting, and I think that I still can do so because I have not had an opportunity to go through it in as much detail, especially with Kathy's comments. So I can try and get it on the October 23rd agenda, but I think I still have time to get it on the November 6th agenda prior to the November 7th agenda. But yes, the Board of Selectmen also needs to review the finalized recommendations for amendment to the regional agreement to be discussed with the other communities on November 7th at the Pawtucket Regional High School, Middle High School, and the Finance Board is invited to attend, and I will forward to the chair right now the invitation from the superintendent. And that is a very long-winded, backwards way, and I'm very sorry.
No, it's okay. Yes.
Has or will town council review the agreement?
No, town council has not reviewed the agreement because we don't have final amendments to the regional agreement. We have the memo from West Newbury, we have the letter from the selectmen from Merrimack, and then we'll have the memo from the Board of Selectmen with any comments that, recommendations for changes, and at that meeting, I believe they'll be discussed in more detail. I think if anything, there would be a vote contingent upon review by town council prior to getting to town meeting, because we also need to get it reviewed by the Department of Education to make sure that there is jurisdiction within the town to do or make the changes that it's proposing to the regional agreement. So there's still some legal hurdles that need to go through, but I think the initial step is to get all of the parties in one room together with a finalized draft and agreement that this is in fact what they would like to put forward, and then getting that over to town council and the Department of Education for final sign-off, and then making any adjustments as necessary, and then putting that forward at town meeting in April.
So you don't see at this time a need, or that it would be a benefit for town council to give us feedback to incorporate into the conversation with our Board of Selectmen? Not yet?
Not yet. Unless something jumps out as part of Selectwoman Castronellis's memo, I'll definitely would run by something like that if it was something that warranted such, but at this point in time, I don't believe so.
Perfect. Does anyone have anything else on this topic? No? Everyone's good? Okay. The next item on the agenda is the fiscal year '24 budget update. I had forwarded along both the September budget analysis that Ellen provided for both revenue and expenses, and also the free cash certification that we received from Rebecca. So in terms of like expenses, and for me anyway, it's still, pretty early in the year to, develop whether there's anything significantly trending in a negative way. So I wasn't sure if there was anything that you guys have brought up internally in terms of areas of concern or.
There's been nothing that we've discussed so far.
Bill, are you looking up any, I don't want to like continue moving on if you have like questions.
It's like you said, kind of early right now.
Yep.
I mean, see if anything's going south, so. How's the revenue side? It's coming in as expected,
So far, yes.
and we're only 3 months in, so.
The first quarter is a little bit difficult, too, to see a trend because a lot of things get paid out almost in full at the beginning of the year. So it's not just going to be one quarter, it's going to be a little bit sporadic, so it's a little bit hard to tell.
And then, I guess, Rebecca, if we can just touch on the free cash. So it looks like the state has certified the 460,000 for
That's
free
correct.
cash.
That's correct.
And in comparison to what we've seen in the past,
So I actually, as part of my capital plan, had started to put together, let me put- sending you that email, so let me just hit send, and then I'll open that document, because I actually have all of that information readily available. Ironically, I already hit send. Okay, so, capital.
I think it's like anywhere between 300 and 700 generally, but. Can I see that sheet right there? I'm pulling it up on
that's
here.
fine.
And scrolling.
After the-
Yeah, that's after the,
Right. I think it's the right time. Makes me happy. And this is also fairly early in the process.
Yes, we are ahead of schedule, so we were very excited about that. As we had
Schedule.
mentioned with the policies, we are trying to hit those milestones as scheduled.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So for free cash in FY '24 is the 460,440. FY '23 was 691,453. FY '22 was 418,107. And then FY '21 is 217,320, and then FY '20 is 760,265. The years that you'll see the biggest jumps are obviously FY '20 and FY '23. A lot of that has to do with the CARES funding and the pandemic, as well as the ARPA funds and influx of additional monies at that point in time. So those are pretty much, I mean, what we're seeing is
so this is like the average that
is
we're
the average.
seeing.
I know I talked to the West Newbury town manager today, and they're at like $2.3 million, but 400 to 500,000 seems to be pretty much the trend for Groveland in prior years.
Perfect.
With obviously, as we said, certain circumstances driving that figure a little.
Yep.
And as Ruth had pointed out at the last meeting as well, that does also take into consideration the write-off.
It does, and so I think that actually turns out to be great timing because the free cash available to us that we've traditionally used in the budget hasn't really changed that much, so it was good timing. And, you know, as I said in our last meeting, part of the reason that I think our free cash was what it was is because we had a town administrator in place, we had checks and balances, and we had departments that were, you know, not spending their budgets just to spend their budgets. They were, I think, respectful of the tax dollars. And so I think that gave us, the turnbacks, the ability to budget with a little bit of cushion, like we should be doing, turn back what we can doing, and then we have free cash. So I think that that worked as we would hope. So, thank you.
The next item is the fiscal year '25 budget update. I have on here the state of the school district meeting, which you had mentioned is November 8th. 7th, sorry. I didn't know, I mean, we talked about the budget schedule last year. I didn't know if you were, I'm assuming it's still super early. So I didn't know if there was any update that you needed to provide or if just status quo at
Not
the
for the
moment?
budget. My main focus right now is the capital plan and the regional agreement. So once I'm able to finalize both of those, it will be a full-on focus on the budget. So at the next meeting, I plan to have more updates for you.
Perfect. So the next item on the agenda is the reorganization of the finance board, specifically the position of the secretary. I'm going to go ahead at this time to open the discussion, make a motion for Ruth Rivard to be the secretary. I don't know if anyone has a second to that. A second by Alex. So we can open that up to discussion.
Didn't I say I already did my time, took my turn? But it's okay. I've done the minutes the last 2 meetings by default, so I will step into the role. The only thing that I would like to add is that, you know, there is a requirement that we take minutes primarily, as I understand it, to record our votes. However, since additionally, we now record and televise all of the meetings, that is a second recording of the meetings. So I'm going to take the minutes focusing on the votes with a little bit, which is kind of what you saw in the last minutes that I just wrote for you. So as long as everybody's comfortable with that, then I'll sit here and plan to do sort of the minutes, a little bit more of a basic version than the souped-up version that she used to do last year. And I think that should be fine, as long as that's fine with everybody.
No, I'm fine with that, and I appreciate you stepping back into the role.
And I already had almost written that into these minutes, so we may as well make it so.
Okay, there's the motion, the second, all in favor?
As long as she doesn't feel bullied, I mean,
I don't feel bullied, it's fine.
then
We'll make it work. Thank
I
you.
think you're awesome then, and I vote yes.
Unanimous.
I appreciate your vote, sir.
Thank you, Ruth.
You're welcome.
So then the next item, Rebecca, if you have any other additional updates at this time?
Not necessarily. Like I said, my main focus right now has been the capital plan and trying to get all that information out there. I think, like I had mentioned at our last meeting, the first year I kind of focused on trying to bring it back to the way that the former finance director had approached the capital plan in terms of formatting and what it looked like, just to kind of keep the familiarity as we explored different ways to move forward. Then just this past year, it was kind of a big data dump of trying to understand exactly what we had for assets, inventory, infrastructure, and kind of get all of that information out there. This year, I'm using the Collins Center template, what they've done in a lot of other communities for their capital improvement plan, and it really is kind of more of like a plan type of document. So it does provide more detail in regards to, you know, what we have for our assets, inventories, things of that nature, but it also gives you an understanding of like different funding mechanisms that we have available to us, not just our standard way of saying, okay, we have free cash stabilization and capital stabilization, what do we want to do, what can we accomplish? It kind of goes into a little bit more detail about how there's other ways to fund these capital improvements that are necessary, and that includes, you know, something that Selectwoman Cashinellis had brought up the other day about, you know, and what this board had actually talked about too, about roadways, infrastructure. Those are capital projects and something that we should be taking into consideration as we plan for the next fiscal year and beyond, including those projects that we are going to be in the pipeline. And just because something is a part of that capital plan, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to fund it that way, or that, you know, it's automatically going to be a bond, or it's automatically going to be free cash or something of that nature. If there's a way to fund it through grants or Chapter 90 or CPC or any of the other funding mechanisms that are in play, we can utilize those to address our capital needs without defaulting automatically to free cash, stabilization fund, et cetera. So the plan really tries to take a closer look at those other funding mechanisms and apply them where possible, and kind of dive into that a little bit more in detail as to what that means and what that looks like, and just to kind of give a little bit more of a strategic thought process as to our capital planning. So that's my hope for this year, which is a huge undertaking in my opinion, because it's not just an Excel spreadsheet anymore. It's more than that. And then also moving forward, hopefully giving us enough bones that the plan will be even more robust in years to come. So I'm hoping that the board will have an opportunity to review that shortly and understand that we're also taking into consideration the finance policies that this board helped create, making sure that we're meeting our percentages for debt and what we have in our reserves and how we're approaching that. So that's been the main focus right now. And again, I hope to have that for you for the next meeting.
Perfect, thank you.
Oh, and sorry, the one other update that I should mention, not potentially, have to mention, the Whittier School Building Project. That is something that is coming forward. They have scheduled public sessions in the district around. I sent out a press release with our firm about when that meeting will be held. I don't have it in front of me, but it's going to be at the library. I'll pull it up right now.
Groveland's is November 18th.
November
From
18th
10
at the
to
library.
12.
And so that is going to allow residents to get a better understanding of exactly what it is that they're proposing. They have done a couple of them already. So if you go to the Whittier Building site, you'll see the presentations that they provided, and it gives a lot of information in terms of the project and what you're looking at. Groveland is looking at a assessment or the capital share of about $24 million. The share of our capital assessment is based upon the total eligible students in the district, not per enrollment. So that's something that's part of the regional agreement that we have with Whittier. That agreement hasn't been updated since the 70s. It's actually written on a typewriter, so you can't even really search the document the way that you would want to. So it is long overdue for an overhaul. And I have been having conversations with other communities, and we all agree that that is something that we definitely want to address. Other communities, some of them similar to Groveland, some of them not, some of them cities, are really struggling with how this project will impact their budgets. A lot of them already have schools that they've received MSBA loans or have worked with MSBA on, so they have recently or in construction schools, and this is just something that they don't have planned. And all of our buildings were built around the same time, so there's other schools, other facilities that are in badly need of repair. Some communities have recently passed overrides. They don't think that they're going to want to go back to their communities, or that their communities would be willing to pass an override. If they're not able to pass an override, what does that mean? How is Whittier able to move forward? There's been a lot of questions and concerns about the way that Whittier has approached this particular issue. Standard procedure has always been that it would go through the communities, and individual communities would vote on the matter. This particular way is looking at it from a majority, from a voter's perspective. A lot of the member communities are some of the smaller communities, such as Groveland, West Newbury, Merrimack, but then you have your Haverhills, which are, make up 68% of the student population enrollment at the school. So will that carry the vote in a way that is not reflective of our community? So I think that there's a bunch of different conversations happening as to how this will play out and how this will impact us. Our last assessment for the school for fiscal year 24 was $782,000 or something to that tune. That is actually lower than the prior year because we went from 46 students to 35 students. So that factor in and of itself can really impact our budget substantially, just the matter of enrollment. And then that doesn't take into consideration what we have for commitments to the Pawtucket Regional School District, and it doesn't take into consideration the enrollment numbers for Essex Tech. So we're just not really sure exactly what's going to happen. So the presentation for Groveland, as you mentioned, will be very informative and helpful for residents to get some additional information as to what it is that they're proposing and why they feel as though they need to take the steps that they are. I would very much encourage those to either attend and/or look at the recording. I believe it will be recorded by our cable department, so to review that recording or even review the recordings of other meetings in the district that have occurred, to write in, ask questions, and be part of the conversation. And I will be sharing as much information as I receive it with the board so that you're fully aware of what impacts or what potential impacts are headed our way.
Is that all?
I have a question.
So this capital software you have, you're talking about, does it also take into consideration the age of some of the assets? As you know, I imagine it's something like an access database or something you're plugging in, entering fixed assets, and I've got a truck, it's a 2022 Ford Bronco, blah, 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 I paid this much for it, expected life, 5 years, and you go down and chart it all out. Does it return red flags, like, hey, this particular item, that particular item is past its useful life?
So no, so it's not a database, so I have an Excel spreadsheet of all that information that I gathered last year. This particular year is just a Word document with giving you information, charts, things that are, show the money and how things have been allocated in prior years and how we could move forward with funding them. But we do have like not a database, but an Excel spreadsheet that lists out all of our current equipment, our fleet inventory, all the information as to when it was acquired, replacement costs, the useful life or the expectancy based upon the wear and tear. What you experience in the police department isn't necessarily what you're going to experience with another vehicle. So it gives you some information, but it doesn't alert you or flag anything or say, hey, remember this is, about to hit 20 years. You're really going to need to replace this soon. It doesn't do anything like that, but something we can explore.
Yeah, I know. When I first got here, we were woefully behind in addressing some of these infrastructure needs. Got so far behind that it cost an enormous amount of money at that point to get up to today's technology, because it really hadn't been updated along the way. So I'd really like to see that forward thinking really take hold. Not only, like you said, when we're going to need it and how we're going to pay for it, as opposed to, oh, darn, guess what? Give me 3 fingers we can stick in the dike so the water doesn't come through, and then we'll figure out what to do. Hope is not a good strategy, right?
No, definitely agree. I mean, that's the objective for sure, is to try and get that all established and to be very transparent about what the projects are. It's not just for that fiscal year. There's a rhyme and a reason why we should put projects forward, not just because somebody said this year I want a car or this year I want a truck. That's not the thought process behind it. It is more of that, strategic thinking, okay, these panels have aged, they're no longer working. If we need to upgrade our system or if we need to plug something else in, we're talking about, a major fire hazard. We can't have that. These need to be updated. We have roofs, they're leaking, the panels, things of that nature, where it really kind of takes into consideration why these things should be funded, not just actual tangible, items, which I guess those are tangible items, but you know what I mean, that you can use every day, because like you said, a lot of times the things that you don't use every day but take for granted, like the roof, you don't think about the roof until there's a leak, but there could be a leak in somebody's office and not another person's office. So it's important to take into consideration the aging infrastructure and how we need to address it. Is it something we can repair, or is it something we need to replace, and how we can strategically go about. So do we bond? Do we lump projects together? Can we get a grant? Is there a loan program? Just different things like that, but definitely taking into, like you're mentioning, consideration of those long-term needs and situations.
And then prioritizing those items based upon need and
Not wants.
I think even as an Excel spreadsheet, you can still kind of build that feature in to an extent where if you know the date it went into service and you know its useful life is 5 years, you can add that formula that says, hey, useful life is this date, and then you can filter the information and say, okay, like what's coming due in 5 years, what's coming due in 4 years, what's coming due. So that way, when you're doing that capital plan and you're putting all that information together, you can get that data.
Yeah, you can
Not going to
even-
be a nice, pretty push the button, here's a report, but you can
Yeah.
work
You can
with
even
the
do some
data.
conditional formatting where if you have today's date, and then that date, conditional
within-
formatting will highlight it red.
Highlight it, yep.
At a certain point in time, and say, oh, that wasn't there yesterday, what do I have to look at?
That makes sense. We can play around with that for sure.
Yeah.
I like playing around with stuff.
There you go. Well, like I said, I have all the data, so if there's a way to format it in a way that you're describing, I would love to take advantage of it.
Yeah. It's easy. We could do it by like fiscal year, put the fiscal year at the top, and the conditional format will drop it all,
Don't make it too.
flag it all out.
Too complicated,
Yeah.
nice and simple.
All right, is that all that you have? You had a question?
My question was following up on the Whittier project. So the project, as it's going to the ballot, is just, it's not based on community, it's based on total votes.
That is correct. They're going for the majority of those who show up at the polls and vote.
So for instance, whoever shows up in Haverhill could pass the project, and we won't have the numbers to offset that. So it's a little bit frustrating that our community is, once again, just getting something put toward us with little say. That said, say 100% of Groveland residents show up and say no, and it passes anyways. Then we need to make a decision if we have a debt exclusion, because now is going to be another potentially unfunded cost to us that we need to come up with $24 million out of our budget.
We would 100% need a debt exclusion of some sort, or else we would be talking about cutting services in order to allow for, if we're assessed, we're assessed. We can't change the assessment. So if that is the case and it's forced upon us, just like the Pentucket Regional School, as we talked about, if we didn't get the override, we'd have to cut that money out of our budget. So if we.
We're talking significantly more than
We're talking about
our own school,
building,
our own school
So you're
district.
talking
not an
about probably
operating budget.
a little, about $1 million. Right.
For the
For
Whittier?
For the Whittier building project.
Okay. That's in its entirety? Or is that just for us?
For the
So-
budget.
24 million
Okay.
in total for the project.
Hmm.
So there's 35 students in there right now.
So 24 means,
Our assessment,
it's like,
yeah,
it's like a $400 million project, I heard.
right.
And the cost is being allocated by total eligible students.
Eligible students.
Not those who attend?
Correct.
But even if it was based upon enrollment, it wouldn't really necessarily change too much.
Because then the whole equation changes, and the pieces of it aren't that different.
Exactly. So for the capital side, I think it's 4.2%, and the enrollment allocation is 2.6% of the entire cost in comparison to our 11-member communities. So it's definitely, yes, exactly what you said. If the voters pass it at the ballot to move forward, then it comes to the individual member communities as their assessment, and then the individual member communities have to figure out how they're gonna fund it. Some can maybe fund it through their budget, some can't, and if they can't, they have to go through overrides or debt exclusions. If that does not pass, then the municipality has to figure out how to come up with that money, and that's going to result in cutting of services and operational funds and taking away from the Pawtucket Regional School District as well in terms of what we're able to provide for their assessment.
And not that I would want to go here, just to discuss options. If it's not funded, is an option to say,
then we can't send our kids to that school, and we're done.
So I've been reading the regional agreement. I haven't had a chance to thoroughly go through it because I'm working on the other regional agreement, but in an initial look at it, from what I'm hearing, is that in order to leave the regional agreement, all the member communities have to allow you to leave, and whatever percentage of debt or assessment has already been assessed to you, you're responsible for. So even if it was something that we wanted to do and we were successful in leaving, if it did in fact pass and we were given that additional capital assessment, we wouldn't be able to not honor that.
Can't just walk away.
Yes,
You still have to pay.
yes.
This is harder than getting out of the Big Ten.
I believe Boxford walked away, but they did it before the building
So
project.
I asked that question today at one of the meetings that I was at, and I don't know the exact answer, but what I was told was that they, at the time, had no students enrolled, and that's why they were able to leave at that point in time. I'm not sure if that's true. That is just when I asked the question the same way, that's what they
Because that would be a
stated.
coincidence.
I find that hard to believe. That they didn't have one single student in that school.
It's just frustrating that our community stepped up, supported a new school. We have educational options for our students, yet now there's another situation coming at us that could really cripple the town.
And we're
And
not,
Essex Aggie did this to us, how many years ago? 7? 5? I mean, that whole facility is brand new within the last decade,
But we pay
right?
per student attendance for Essex Tech. We're not paying a,
We didn't pay any part of that
capital.
that school project?
I think it might be incorporated into,
Now, one of the questions I have is, I think you said that there was like 35 or 46 students that might attend this school, is that right?
There's 35 there
So
now.
what-
right now it's 35, last
Out
year it
of
was 46,
Groveland?
out of Groveland.
So what ages are they? What age bracket? Like high
It's
school?
high school.
It's high school.
9 through 12.
So I guess my question is, why wouldn't they just attend the school that we have?
It's a vocational
It's a
school.
vocation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
but there is another vocational school,
Is that the Essex?
Essex Tech.
And that's school choice.
which is school choice, and it has different offerings, different options.
Right.
But at the cost of, I'm not at all suggesting that we don't remain part of the Whittier program. I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
our options and how we get backed into this corner of another place that we just can't afford without going to the voters, because I feel like we really waited until we had to and did what we had to support the school in our own community, and now this other one it's a concern.
Certainly is. Especially when you don't seem to have much of a choice or a voice.
Well, and also, we didn't really have knowledge, I mean, I guess I kind of read in the paper that this is eventually going to be coming, but it's not something that we really actively considered for coming so soon when we just asked the voters to pass another override.
But I think to Rebecca's point, that the problem we're facing right now is all the schools around have been built around the same time. So they're all beginning to deteriorate about the same time. And they all need to be rehabbed, which we found out with our school would have cost $94 million to rehab that and bring it up to today's code, when you can have a brand new one for 144. It economically didn't make sense to rehab.
Well, that's
two
what
old
Whittier's
buildings.
saying too, that it's
And-
going to cost just as
Right.
much to bring it to code.
When you have to take into consideration all the ADA compliances and new plumbing and wiring codes, these costs are astronomical. And then you're stuck with a, 50-year-old Ford. How much longer is it gonna run, right? So,
Well, at some place,
This
it
is,
becomes a
um,
classic.
It'll be interesting to see what their presentation is. I mean, I know that they have gotten into, the specifics of the building, and just like Ruth had mentioned, they've fallen into the same situation as a Pentucket, where, the repairs are going to be very costly just to get them into code compliance, and at that point, you're paying just as much as you would for a new school, so why not go for the new school? So it is one of those things, and Whittier has been fortunate enough, because of the type of school that they are, to be able to utilize the students to do a lot of the fixes in-house and try and move forward with that type of labor, which brings down the cost substantially. However, you know, that all being said, they can't move forward with any projects right now because they're not in compliance. So from my understanding is that the building commissioner in Haverhill has stated that they can't pull building permits because they don't have a sprinkler system and they don't have some other code compliance things that need to be in place in order for them to do so. So the presentation will give you more details about what those fixes are, and from a comparative standpoint as to, you know, what it is they're asking and why they're asking for that instead of the renovation and repairs. But I think, like we're all saying, that the communities are struggling with that reasoning because, you know, not now. But then everyone says, well, then when? And so that kind of comes into play too. Like, is there a way for us to do more of a phased approach, and what that phased approach looks like? So it's not something that it's just Groveland grappling with. I mean, like we said, the other 11 member communities, I haven't heard from one that I've talked to that thinks that this is going to end in a
Happy way.
In an amicable manner.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate because we all appreciate Whittier and everything that Whittier does and the programs that they have in place. They've excelled beyond belief in the things that they've been able to accomplish. And I think that's the hardest part too, is that it's not an argument over the school being a good school, because it is, and we're proud to be a member community. That's not the issue. And they are one of our regional schools. They are our school. The big issue is that from our position as, you know, a financial management of the town, something of this nature, which impacts so few, has such a large impact on the majority. And it's going to be very hard for people to separate that out as part of the argument and make it more personal, because it has nothing to do with what Whittier has been able to accomplish or what they stand for or everything that they provide, and everything to do with the fact that we have a town of 6,900 residents. Like, we need to be mindful of how we're spending their money and what we're spending it on and what impacts them directly on a day-to-day basis, especially when it comes down to a situation of this nature. And 35 students currently, it's going to be very challenging to say that
Benefits
yeah,
the town.
Exactly. I think it's going to be a very difficult conversation for all involved without people becoming offended by what's being stated.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's too bad that the two schools, Essex Aggie and Whittier, didn't offer the same programs. That's why we support these two different vocational schools. If they did, we could drop one, and then you could almost make the argument, because it would probably double the student population at one school or the other, that it's worthwhile. Or if we could all, you know, if Essex Aggie offered everything that Whittier did, we could shift all over there. But the problem is they don't.
Right.
No, they're pretty different.
Yeah, I mean, Essex Aggie is, they
It's
don't call it Essex
agricultural.
Aggie anymore, but it's heavily agricultural, where Whittier
Whittier's
is
the
heavily
trades.
technical and trade-oriented.
Yeah.
And therein lies kind of the conundrum that a town like Groveland faces.
And the trades are expensive for the school building and the tools, and I imagine it's very different than a traditional classroom. It costs money.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
wish
a
they'd
challenge.
Just produce more.
But I agree, I don't, with how expensive college
Engineers.
is today, I don't take anything away from the trades whatsoever. I just worry about how our residents can foot the bill, and what happens if they don't want to.
I mean, it's more than our budget
Yeah.
in total.
So I'll continue to keep the board updated as I receive information. I'll send it over to the chair. Again, I advise people to attend the meeting at the library, or listen in, or ask questions and be involved in the process. And we'll just keep on hoping for the best.
I have another question. Are they, do they have to comply with the same MSBA rules and regulations that we did when we built that school?
Yes.
And what is their student enrollment? Has it been diminishing, steady, or increasing over the years? Do we know that?
I don't know that.
Not from our perspective, but total school population.
I'm not sure. I'm only, when I look at their budget right now, I'm only looking at the enrollment for the last 2 years, so I don't have a full picture of that, so I'm not sure what direction they're trending in. I would imagine the same direction that all of us have been trending in, which is student enrollment is down, but at the same time, I know there's a few outliers on that, that we're seeing in other communities. I know Amesbury's is up, but, others are down. So I think it depends, but I don't know. I'd have to look at that more closely.
Yeah, because what I'd like to avoid is what, would have happened to us. MSBA says your population is going to be X, so therefore the building can only be Y square feet. Anything over that, it's all on you. Well, with a school now that has so many different towns and cities involved in it, will they be building to what they want to build to, or will they be building to what the MSBA says you need to build to? And, for example, MSBA says you can't build a school more than 300,000 square feet. Anything else is on you. Well, the school says, fine, we're going to build 500,000 square feet and just pass the cost along to the other towns and cities because we don't care. I mean, is that a possibility?
So
And what's being done to make sure that that is safeguarded?
So I'm told that the MSBA calculation will come into play with how many the square footage, and that, at that community meeting, I'm sure they'll give you that in more detail, and if you look at the actual presentation, it might even be in there, and I just missed it. But I do know that the superintendent had stated that they were going to cap enrollment. So that was one of the questions I had, because I wasn't sure how it worked, so when you cap, so we only have 35 students in there currently, but if somebody were to try and apply, they could get denied. Whereas in our school, if you were to go to, you can't be denied from Pawtucket Regional High School. It doesn't work that way. But in the Whittier Regional School, you can be denied your application, and they have an application process. So their enrollment is like a total figure. So they get to choose the applicants that come through. So it's kind of one of those things where we had all said, well, if you get this brand-new school and you start giving more enrollment, then that's going to increase our assessments, because obviously you'll be able to take more. So you don't know where that's going to come from, because there's no set cap for each individual community, but you don't know. So I know that was something that was taken, that they'll talk about more at the community meeting. But I do know that somebody had mentioned the other day, and I would need to do more research, because I'm not as well versed in the school side of things, but even if they cap enrollment, they'll still have, it will still impact our assessments. So even, there's no guarantee that it won't have a financial impact with the new school.
Yeah, I would be more concerned about the hypothetical opposite, that they have a cap and no child in Groveland met their requirements, but we're still stuck with the bill. Now, I'm really off the charts. That's a hypothetical that could happen, right? They could say none of the children here that applied are qualified to attend Whittier. But here's the bill, thanks for coming.
You'd have to pay for the ones that were currently already accepted, but yes,
Or the new building,
yes.
even though we have no students going there.
Yes, if you had a freshman class that had no Groveland students, but yet you had somebody in, sophomore or senior year, you'd have to pay for those individuals, but you'd have nobody in the school system and for the freshman year, and you'd still be on the hook for the capital assessment.
Building.
So a Soviet Union form of taxation.
Assuming that they don't accept anybody, but it might not come to that.
I mean, I would hope they wouldn't, but you can see what my point is. We could end
Yeah.
up with
I
one or
mean,
two
we already
students there.
lost, however many, 6 or 7 kids in 1 year. So if that trend were to continue, then, yeah, you could end
Now
up
I'm
at
paying
that
for something I have no
point.
benefit of.
Well, we pay for
Well, there's a benefit,
them in addition to the capital. We pay for each
Well,
student.
but
understand
it's
the
not the,
benefit.
it's not the
This is-
town.
The
The-
capital,
the-
no.
Right.
As a
none
whole,
of my-
isn't
none- none of
capital
my
just the
decisions,
students.
none of my
We're not paying any
decisions.
capital right now. We're paying
Right.
for the
We
students who
benefit
attend.
from this
We're paying
brand-new
capital
school.
now.
I'm paying my tax dollars to,
This is potentially a stupid question. I'm actually quite sure.
no,
it is.
nothing stupid.
Nothing
But,
stupid.
The $1 million, is that a one-time payment, or is that every year upkeep, teacher salary for this Whittier school? Or is it just for the building?
Just for the building.
It's just for the
So
building.
it's a one-year hit?
No.
No,
No.
Okay, so.
I wish.
Let's say.
It'll be
you know,
over
going back to
probably
that example
25 or
with
30.
Boxford walking away because they didn't have any students.
Right.
Let's say in like 2 years, the 35 goes to zero.
That's
Are we
what he's
still-
saying.
what
But
the
you would
answer to
still be
that?
on the hook for
We'd
your
still be.
share of
Yeah.
that 24 million, because that is, you were enrolled at the time.
Even in like 5 years, no one goes
Even if
there.
there's no one there in 5 years, you wouldn't have the operating assessment.
So let me ask you this.
So we have an
Is
operating
there-
and a
oh,
capital.
Is there any way to get out of this? That's like my end goal right now. right? Is there any happy ending for us?
Rebecca's going through the hieroglyphics now of reading
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I apologize for
No, I
all
was,
these questions.
Stone
but This is
Temple.
alarming for me, so.
You think?
No, it's extremely alarming, and that's why I think that, like I had said, like, sitting down with some of the other member communities, we're all looking at each other and we're like, we just can't do this.
Right,
Like, it's just
exactly.
not gonna work.
Like, this was my question, and I'm not placing blame on anybody, but like the communication, like failure. Like, how, can't fix what happened in the past, but how do we make sure that this, like, there's communication now with them?
I think that
Um,
they have been communicating, and they have made mention that they were going to be doing a building project. And I think that there was one point the superintendent said that we have been telling you all this, and we have had a building committee, you do have a school committee representative, all of these things, and nobody was really listening. So there was that argument that was made. I don't know whether that was true. I've only been here for the last 2 years, and I know that they've mentioned it, but and to my error, I always assumed and always thought it was going to go back to the member communities, and you needed everybody to be in favor from a community side in order for it to go through. I had no idea that you could actually circumvent that and go to the majority of the voters, which I think is the reason why a lot of other communities are a little frightened right now, because if it had all come back to us, and when the superintendent told us about this, it's like, we'd love to support you,
Well,
but this
that- I
is
mean,
never gonna
that's-
pass.
You know,
But now it's like a little bit like, well, will it, because of the way that the vote is now shifted?
like if
Because-
Haverhill is 60 whatever percent of the population, and Haverhill votes it in, then
Is
you're
it just
done.
simple majority?
Yes.
it's a
Yes.
simple majority.
So if Haverhill wants it, I mean, it's in the bag.
Exactly.
But we're making assumptions too that Haverhill would want it. Haverhill has its own schools, it has its own renovations that has been, I've seen some things in the paper, I'm not too aware of all of their issues, but I know that they have other things that are going on, and a lot of families are struggling in general. So I don't think anybody wants to see their taxes increase, and I don't think if Haverhill wants to see it, that Haverhill's gonna have all the money to put towards it. I mean, they have a pretty big lump sum of money that they have to come up with as well, but that's not to say they won't either.
Right.
So I think that's
Not to
the
say that they don't
fear.
have the capabilities to do it if they
Exactly.
want it.
They have more flexibility than a small town like we would have.
Do
I
you know
would
of
think.
any towns in the, how big's the membership? How many towns?
11 communities. So it's Amesbury, Georgetown, Groveland, Haverhill, Ipswich, Merrimack, Newburyport, Rowley, Salisbury, and West
So you
Newbury.
have some pretty affluent
Listen to you.
towns in there, right? So are there any towns that are like, yeah, I think this is a great idea?
Not
Or
that
are they
I've
all
talked to.
kind of pumping the brakes and saying?
I had a meeting with almost all of them today, except for Haverhill, Ipswich, and Newbury, and all of them said the same thing. that
But
they're-
Ipswich is in the news saying, we don't know how we can afford this.
So then, yes, and I believe Newbury would be on the same page. So we've talked about just about everybody, and they are all in agreement that it's not something that they don't necessarily not support, but something they can't support because it would,
The financial capacity is not there.
yes,
It's all based on citizen vote, right?
yes.
So it's
right
all
now.
about like clearly communicating in all those towns that we can't afford this.
And somebody at the meeting that today had mentioned potentially going to the school committee because, and I'm still looking into it myself, but and asking them to go back to the way that it would have been, which is to go to each individual member community and see if it passes and get the majority that way. Instead of going to the majority of the vote, and it's on a special election in January, with only a small 8-hour window as opposed to all of our other elections, and kind of putting us in a situation where the variables really come into play, as opposed to just at our typical annual type of meeting and election that we have, and it's been pretty routine, and we understand the turnout, et cetera.
Not Lawrence?
So is that a part of the
Peter Lawrence.
agreement that they're allowed to not look for the majority of the towns, but they can go straight to a public-wide vote?
That's been something that they've been talking about recently, other communities, because, the first, I think it was funny because everybody was like, as soon as they heard the news, how do we leave the agreement? Everyone says the same thing. And so then it was just kind of like backing into the situation that way. And so, yeah, they're,
Yeah? Yeah, what?
they're all in the
Guess
same.
is as good as ours.
They're all agreeing that it's not necessarily the way that they had envisioned this to go forward, and they're asking the questions as to whether or not they had the legal ability to circumvent what process that we had routinely and historically known, and even calling into question that, from a statutory standpoint, any type of debt, vote on debt requires a 2/3 vote. And here you're looking for the majority. So it's kind of like goes against what it is in terms of common practice, as it just, so they're asking. So yes, they're asking that question. They're asking whether or not they can continue to move in this direction, and
Yeah.
ask them to go back to the way that we know.
Because even if it was written in the 1970s, I have to think that the population in the 70s would be somewhat proportional to what it is today. And nobody in their right mind in Groveland, Merrimack, West Newbury, these other towns, smaller towns, would have given away such power to
Yeah.
the big cities. I might be wrong. I mean, maybe we're dealing with people that really had no foresight or, no gray matter in between the brain. I don't know. But it doesn't seem wise to give away that much power when you made the agreement in the first place in 1970s, in the 70s.
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I just know that there's been questions as to whether or not they should be able to, or even if they are able to. And there's been a push by certain communities to go to the school committee and have them deny the language to be placed on the ballot, and to ask the school committee to send the vote back individually to the communities.
I'm sure you've already addressed this, so I apologize, but is this contractual? Like, is this in the agreement? Like them being able to circumvent what is known and go right to the citizen?
It's not necessarily circumvented, it's kind of like a,
Alternative calculation.
But is
it's like a loophole from what I know, it's, they want to get something accomplished. They knew they weren't going to get it one way, so they're trying a different way, and that different way happens to be available to them based upon the way that the law is written. I'm not sure, but I don't even know if that's what's being called into question, is whether or not they even have the ability to do that.
Right.
And
And I guess that's my question,
Yeah.
like, do they actually, and you guys probably have already talked about it, so I apologize, but like, do they have the legal ability to do that? Like, is it in the contract / agreement? Like, option B, you can do this.
so I'm not sure. Like I said, I started to read the regional agreement and get to the assessment portion of it and how the assessment's calculated, but I haven't looked at it in more detail. But I know that people are asking that question. I know that the other communities have asked that question. I know other communities have talked to their town council about that and in preparation for the vote. So I know that we're getting more answers to that question very shortly.
Do we have the same school committee member? It was Lisa O'Connor, I
Yes.
think, last we saw?
It's still the same. And she's an elected school committee member, I believe.
Who's that?
What was her
Elected
name?
school committee meeting.
Lisa O'Connor?
Lisa O'Connor? So
On
she
the
knows all about this.
Pentucket.
I'm assuming?
She's not on Pentucket, though. She used to be.
Oh, okay. See, I'm.
She got voted off.
Because I know that we were talking today about how there's certain individuals who are on their school committee, and then they're appointed to serve on the Pentucket School Committee, but they also serve on their other committee, on their local, regional, but you know what I mean,
Yeah.
on the school committee that they're elected to, and they're called into question.
She's not on the PRSD website. I checked
Yes.
that
So then
yesterday.
They must
so-
have just not appointed a new individual. But they don't have to. She can still be appointed. She doesn't have to be on the PRSD school committee to be the school committee representative for Whittier. they're appointed to that position. They can be somebody else, from all I understand.
So we should loop her into our conversations.
So after that meeting today, we had talked about doing a joint letter with communities to express our concerns and direct them towards our state legislative delegation, because they originally had funded the school back in the 70s for its construction. We had talked about reaching out to our school committee members, and we had talked about reaching out to Whittier and other decision makers and leaders throughout the community to figure out what would be the best response. So just having those conversations. But as a school committee member of Whittier, she will probably know more information than others, so I definitely wouldn't shy away from asking her for additional information and to see how the process is played out from her point of view. I know when I talked to one of the other members of the building committee, they think it was there was only one vote, one no vote to move the project forward.
How long is this legal agreement that we're in with the member communities?
How long, I'm sorry?
How long is the agreement? Like how many pages?
Oh, it's not too long, it's,
This is the one that's like typed out in the 70s?
Typed out, yeah.
Yeah, all
An
right.
IBM select. They hit the return key.
Yeah.
That's what I,
It had the little thing on the
so
top.
it's like that document, so there's 8 pages,
Oh.
but it's,
Can you do like, there's a way to like take that format and like PDF will read it and
I
then so you're
can.
able
yeah,
to search for
I
it?
was just being facetious, but
Oh.
yeah, but I mean, but that's what it is, it's a scanned copy of that, it's an older document, you literally, it's the typewriter that wrote the document, meaning it's an agreement that shouldn't have.
And I'm assuming it's like ours as well. There was a original period of time, and until you say otherwise,
it
it will just
renews.
continue in perpetuity until someone makes a,
Till someone tries to
Bus.
build a new school, and then we look at it.
Yes.
okay.
All right.
No, that's okay. Anyone else have anything on
Ouch.
that
Not
front?
today.
Okay.
Maybe next time.
That's
Um,
painful enough.
If no one objects, while we're talking to Rebecca, I had something that I had kind of put under other items not reasonably anticipated. I was at the school council meeting for the Bagnell today, and a question came up about the status of the safety doors for the cafeteria. So I was just curious where in the process that stood. They got approved for funding at the town meeting. And my understanding is that the chief of police is, has this as a priority for the students there. So I just wanted to see where it fell in the process of projects that were going on.
Yep, so we did finish and finalize the water fountains over at the Bagnell. That was a capital project that we had approved. And then the next priority was the doors. The doors require an engineer or an architect to review and to evaluate the systems that we have in the ceiling, at the drop ceiling, but we have infrastructure above it, and then also look at the sprinklers and make sure that we're still in compliance with the move. Essentially, it sounds really simple. We're just taking the door where it is currently and we're just
Moving
taking it down and shifting it over so that it can lock, but there's, other mechanisms that need to be in place. We had a meeting today, actually, ironically, myself and Bob Danforth with the Pawtucket Regional School District, and we collectively reached out to one of the vendors that we used here in Town Hall for the doors, the front doors. And so we're just looking for them to get back to us and see whether or not they have somebody in-house that can help us with the structural analysis that would be necessary in order to move forward with the project. So we're anticipating as soon as we get and hear back from them, that company being on the state bid list as well, will help alleviate some of the concerns with, going and getting the project out for bid. So we're hoping by the winter time. So we're thinking that by the end of December, January. Because the money's already been allocated for us. It really is just figuring out when they can get in there, and because of the area being so heavily traveled during the day through kids,
Right.
because it is the cafeteria and the gym, making sure that we can make those arrangements for either maybe when they're in, on vacation for a winter break or something like that.
Okay. I just said I would bring it up and I'd circle back with
Yeah.
the council.
I had a couple of parents reach out to me, and I let them know that we were going to try and get it done by the end of the year. But like you had mentioned, Chief Gillen has made it very clear on multiple occasions that it is a high priority of his, and it is our main focus in terms of our capital projects for the school currently.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Does anyone have anything else? Okay, the last item is just the next meeting, which I just covered this. So we had it set up for November 15th, 2023 at 6 o'clock. So that follows the pattern of the third Wednesday of the month.
15th, you said?
Looks to me.
Yep, November 15th. And that's all that I have.
Shameless plug for Pumpkin Fest tomorrow.
Yeah?
Weather looks beautiful, pick of the week. There's going to be a lot of fun. 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock,
4:30 to 8.
4:30 to 8. 3 food trucks?
There's 2 food
2
trucks.
food trucks?
Live,
Full of,
live music. There'll be a showing of Spookily the
Spookily the
Square
Pumpkin?
Pumpkin towards the evening hours. We'll be lighting the pumpkins around 6:30, 7 o'clock. We'll have a bunch of crafts. We have a small maze for young children. We have pony rides.
candy?
We have lots of candy. We will have the police department will be handing out Halloween bags as they did last year. They'll have the fire protection and educational maze that they had out last year, which was a huge hit. We'll have the photo booth as we did last year as well. So we have a lot of great activities, and we really do hope that residents and beyond will come and enjoy the day.
When's this?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow night,
Tomorrow night.
tomorrow evening. Does that sound fun?
Sounds like a blast.
I'll be there. With, what do I have? Harry Potter, Hermione, and Sarah Sanderson?
Who?
Sarah Sanderson from Hocus Pocus.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what that is.
So,
Sanderson sisters. Awesome.
These kids aren't old enough. They haven't reached that level in Nickelodeon yet.
it's my youngest one who's Sarah. She's 6.
No?
So, but nope, I don't have anything else. Anyone else have anything? Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn at 7:17.
Is there a second? Alex will second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.